Within just 2 weeks of its release, speedrunners have now been able to beat Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 in under 9 minutes. And yeah, this skips pretty much the entire game, but even faster this time. Let's check it out. So about 2 weeks ago, I made a video covering the initial unrestricted any % speedrun route for Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, where at the time, the record stood at under 15 minutes. And if you thought beating the game that fast was crazy enough, in a very short amount of time, new strats have been discovered to now bring the speedrun world record to a crazy time of just under 9 minutes. Like, top runners are already getting to the CatNap boss fight in around 3 minutes, which is nuts. Anyways, so unlike my previous video from before official rules for this any % category were established, here the time for the run starts not at the intro cutscene, but rather as soon as you start to move in the trash compactor area. And because of this, you'll actually want to not start moving right away, but instead wait until you hear the sound of the alarm in the background noise 10 times. Now this might seem a bit cryptic, but since things around this area, namely the piston platform section ahead, are time dependent, waiting at the start for 10 of these beeps will optimize when you should get to it, so you don't waste time there by having to wait for the next cycle in case you miss it by the time you get there. And since time for the speedrun doesn't start until you start moving, there's quite literally no penalty to doing this. Anyways, yeah, once we start moving on the 11th beep here, we can start the timer and head up the slope to get to this part of the compactor wall that we can slip out through. Unfortunately, unlike in the previous runs where runners were moving during the intro cutscene to start the compactor section earlier, which would have had this gap open by the time we got there, now we actually have to sit around for a couple of seconds to wait for it to open. Anyways, once out, we can zip up to this area using our handy dandy grab pack, get through this little hall to jump onto the piston there. And to save a bit of more time, we actually don't even have to jump onto the other pistons here, as we can just ride up this first one for a bit and then jump onto this yellow pipe ledge, which takes us right to the room with the hole in the wall. Then from here we can make a sharp left and go through the red door and subsequent hallway, which brings us to the second piston platforming segment. Now I teased this next trick at the end of my previous video, and since then it's been solidified as one worth doing every single run. So here you'll want to move far enough into this room until the graphic for the auto-saving feature pops up. And this not only indicates that the game is in fact auto-saving like it says it is, but this also lets us get the next checkpoint that, as you'll see in a bit, we'll need to get back into the map. Once that's done, we'll actually want to backtrack a bit to the previous area above the trash compactor, get up to this busted console thing, and then grab this chair. And if you've watched my previous video, you might already know where this is going, but just like how we used barrels in the previous video to make our own barrel elevators to fly up and glitch out of bounds, here we'll grab this chair on the top with both grab pack hands, face our back to the ladder on the wall here, and start pulling to lift us up to the vent above, where here we get to do the first of several crazy tricks of this run. After letting go of the chair and walking back for a bit to position ourselves before grabbing onto it again, we'll actually want to reduce the frame rate the game runs at to 15 frames per second in the options. To keep things simple here, basically the lower the frame rate, the faster the objects you pull will move. And now, with this reduced frame rate, pulling on this chair will absolutely just send us into the sky, or dark empty void, I guess I should say, and we can basically launch ourselves above and across the map all the way to the train tracks just before the entrance to the cable car that takes you down to Playcare. Just before landing, we'll want to revert the game back to 60 frames per second, and then after we land, we can waddle over to just outside the walls of the map here and drop down. And doing this, we can trigger yet another autosave point where, after pausing the game and reloading the last autosave, this will take us back in bounds. Doing this insane trick not only saves having to do the second piston platforming section, but also the first battery and green hand puzzles, and more importantly, the first otherwise unskippable section where the player is introduced to Ollie, who you normally need to wait for to stop yapping before he gives you the battery which you need to proceed. So yeah, not only does this trick look really cool to pull off, but it's also quite useful for shaving off some time. And we're not done with the crazy chair antics just yet, as after going through the security room, doing the first power puzzle there, and throwing the levers here to open up the cable car to Playcare, we can grab this chair and use it to pull ourselves up on top of the cable car, and then once up there, we can move a bit to activate the trigger point that loads in the next map. Then once loaded back in, thankfully the game keeps us on top of the gondola here, and then we'll want to grab yet another chair from below and bring it with us down to the start of the upcoming tunnel segment here. And after flipping it around to this orientation and getting into proper positioning ourselves, we basically rinse and repeat what we did with the first chair boost. Lower the FPS to 15, pull, and away we go. Whee! This time we turn on the jets, I guess, as this boost takes us up way higher than the previous chair. Now these chair boosts may look easy, but they're actually quite tricky to get consistent, and if your positioning isn't great, you can get some unintended consequences. Anyways, after floating for a bit longer until you get to around the top of the Playcare dome that you can see below, you can drop onto this dome panel, which you can easily just clip through all the way to the edge of the map here. And after changing the frame rate back to 60 FPS and doing a little hop of faith across the gap here, we can get back into the map and walk backwards into the next trigger to load the next section of the game. Without this second epic chair boost, you have to sit through another normally unskippable section where Playtime Company's founder explains Playcare and such, and you also skip having to go under the statue to get the key from Ollie, so yet again, pulling off this insane chair boost can yield some quite worthwhile time savings. The barrels were the MVPs in the previous speedrun video, but I think chairs have definitely overtaken their throne this time. Anywho, next we get to the gas production zone, and this time we don't even bother grabbing the purple hand yet as we did before. Skipping it here saves about 10 to 15 seconds-ish, but it also comes at the cost of running the risk of seeing the real CatNap appear in the hallway to the left of the computer terminal in the final fight. Without the purple hand there, if that happens, you're guaranteed to get bamboozled, which will kill the run, but if you're competing for the top speedrun time, those extra seconds saved are worth the risk. Back to the run though, we'll need to make our own elevator again, since we don't have the blue battery yet to power on the elevator that takes us up to the final boss fight. Some runners now have migrated to using these more narrow gas cylinders as their elevating object of choice, but I still tend to find using the barrels a bit more reliable here. Whatever your choice of object to lift you here though, we once again take it to the wall to the left of the elevator, which we can fly up against to get onto this platform out of bounds. And then we do the same thing again against this out-of-bounds wall to bring us up to the back of this door, which moving against can cause the game to load us into the next room, and bam, just like that, only a handful of minutes in, we're already at the final boss. The boss fight here doesn't change all too much since my previous video, as it's still something you need to do for over 180 seconds, and there's not really anything you can do to skip that. That said, a new trick that was discovered is that if the real CatNap appears in the top hatch, you can basically just trap him there by simply just letting go of the door just before you pull it shut and then starting to pull it again right after. Since there can only be one real CatNap on the map at any time, all the others will be the fake phantom ones, making the rest of this fight rather easy, as then the only thing you really need to worry about is plopping in the green batteries into their slots as needed, while also not pulling the top door shut or keeping it open for too long to keep CatNap trapped there. I honestly wonder what would be going through CatNap's head just seeing you open and close the door like this on him for several minutes. Anyways, after over 3 minutes of powering up the computer and keeping CatNap looped in the vent, we can eventually supercharge our green hand and launch it at CatNap to get him nice and crispy before the prototype's hand comes down and tickles the back of CatNap's brain. The run isn't quite done yet though, as we still have to head back down and then start up the ending cutscene. So next up, we can do a trick that makes it so we finish this run without taking the elevator at all, as by hitting the elevator's button with the grab pack and then immediately walking away and then back to it slightly close to the edge, we can trigger the next loading screen and start off in the upper section from where we can drop back down into the map, and I guess free falling is faster than the elevator as this actually saves a few more seconds. And now finally, we get to the game's ending scene, and for a while it was thought that this was just a 3-minute unskippable segment. But recently, a new strat was discovered that effectively slashes this in half. So after starting the cutscene, we can grab the green battery there and then waltz all the way across the main gas production zone to open up this door to now grab the purple hand after all, since we lost our green hand defeating CatNap. And after getting it, we'll actually want to grab onto the green VHS tape in the same room, but just hold it there. Then we can head on back and this time grab a gas cylinder from the main room and bring it into the elevator room. And while still holding on to the VHS tape super far away, we'll want to hop onto the cylinder here and pull up with the left hand. Once it starts to float up a bit, we can finally let go of the VHS tape and then grab the cylinder with the other hand too. And basically why we had to do all of this is that this causes the game to make the cylinder fall really slowly for some reason. And then if we take it over to the elevator and drop it down this gap, we then want to get over to this guide rail thing along the wall, and then we kinda just float here for a while until we can hear the elevator start up above us, and by doing all of this admittedly pretty confusing stuff, we actually tripped the trigger that activates the final part of the ending cutscene. And with this, by slowly floating down here while Poppy dishes out the last few bits of her dialogue, we can hear Kissy Missy meeting her unknown fate that I guess we'll see in Chapter 4, and as the screen cuts to black, that is time for the speedrun. And with all of these tricks, we've skipped over Home Sweet Home, the school and playhouse, and even watching the Hour of Joy tape now. And now that I think about it, taking this speedrun route, we don't even get introduced to Ollie at all. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm not very good at most of these chair boost tricks, let alone the final gas cylinder thing, as like I said, although some of the tricks here may look easy, they can be quite tricky to get consistent without getting blasted off into areas you don't necessarily want to go. In fact, I got a slower time using these strats compared to the older ones, so yeah, although the new tricks can save lots more time, they definitely aren't as beginner friendly. But in any case, as it stands as of the making of this video, the current world record is held by Barney Goose with an insane sub 9 minute time of only 8 minutes and 51 seconds. It's a really cool run, so I highly recommend checking it out. I'll have it linked for you down in the description below. But my friends, that is speedrunning Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. Will the world record time sink much lower? Maybe, but I doubt it'll be as much of a time save as it was up to this point, as the current runs have already gotten rid of 2 lengthy bits of the run that were eating up a lot of time. So I think just below the 9-minute mark is where the runs will hover, at least for a while. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, check out some of my other speedrun videos, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to find your way back here in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for stopping by today, and I will see you in a bit.